Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're looking at Invitation to Sociology, a Humanistic Perspective.
From 1963.
Yeah,
It's really interesting.
it holds up.
It does. It really does.
We're going to be going beyond just like a surface level discussion of the book today.
Yeah.
We really want to dissect the arguments and claims and even the data itself.
Absolutely.
And we're doing all of this with our fellow sociology grad student in mind.
Yeah. You know, one of the first things that I noticed is how it addresses these misconceptions about sociology right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like people thinking that we're just social workers or reformers.
Well, totally. I get that all the time.
Yeah.
Like I'm ready to go and fix society's problems.
Right.
I'm here with my clipboard,
With the clipboard, exactly.
ready to take notes
Right.
and to go protest or something.
Yeah. Well, it does a good job of saying that it's more about understanding how societies work.
Yeah, and the book really emphasizes,
For better or for worse.
that's right,
Yeah.
that it doesn't necessarily have a moral stance.
Right.
That's sociology.
It's about understanding the mechanisms.
Yeah,
And it's not about having a certain moral stance on how they're used.
yeah. Like one of the quotes that really stuck with me is, sociology is just as useful to those planning evil communities as to those planning to destroy them.
Yeah.
Kind of a chilling quote.
Yeah.
But I mean, it does make the point about sociology as like a tool for understanding
Right.
rather than necessarily
Yeah. And, there's even some criticisms about sociology itself, like relying too heavily on statistics.
I mean, I've heard that one too. Like, oh, you're a sociologist. You must be really good at math.
Exactly. Crunching numbers.
Yeah, you're just a number cruncher.
Yeah. Well, the author kind of pushes back on that a little bit and says that statistics is a tool, but sociology is much more than just that.
Right.
And he has a good point there because we need that specific terminology to clarify a lot of these concepts that are kind of vague.
Yeah. Well, he's a good example. He uses the word class,
Right.
which we throw around all the time. But
Yeah. And it can mean so many different things.
yeah, so it can mean like socioeconomic status. It can mean like a group of students.
Right.
But when you're talking about it in sociology,
It has a very specific meaning.
well, it's a very specific meaning.
Right.
And so I think it's valuable that he points that out.
It is. It's valuable.
And it made me think about all the other terms that we use in daily life that when you kind of apply a sociological lens to them.
They take on a whole new meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of lens, the author talks about this sociological demon.
Oh, yeah.
This he borrowed it from Max Weber, and it refers to this deep curiosity about the hidden aspects of social life.
Okay.
Those forces that shape our relationships and the way that we interact.
Sociological demon. That sounds a little,
It's a little intense, but I get what he's saying.
but it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like this drive to uncover what's really going on. Like we're
Oh.
drawn to the mystery of it all.
Yeah, and there was a quote about that the sociologist is someone who is tempted to look behind the facades,
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. I like that one.
peeling back those layers and seeing what's really going on.
So I guess this drive isn't just limited to the present, though, right?
Yeah.
Because he also mentions the past and like how sociology is related to history.
Absolutely. They're both.
Because history is all about understanding the past, too.
It is, and they're both interested in understanding the past, not just for the sake of knowing what happened,
Right.
but to see how it influences us today.
Right. I mean, you think about history. Like, it's not just about memorizing names and dates.
It's not.
It's about understanding the social structures of the time that led to those events happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he goes on to say that there's actually a thrill to sociological discovery.
Okay.
Like you're seeing something familiar in a new light.
It's like that aha moment.
The aha moment.
Like, I never thought about it that way before.
Yeah?
He gives that interesting example of a lecture on the Southern racial system
Yes.
to a classroom of white Southern students.
To a classroom full of white Southern students.
Yeah.
Imagine how uncomfortable.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and how it would challenge those deeply held beliefs.
Totally.
And it's kind of like culture shock.
Yeah.
Where things that we thought we knew suddenly take on this whole new meaning.
It could be unsettling.
And unsettling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. And then it's interesting because he also uses this analogy of walking down the street,
Oh, yeah.
looking at houses.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you see this outward appearance of these houses.
Right.
But you have no idea what's happening inside.
Like each house holds a secret.
Each house holds a secret.
A whole world that we can only glimpse from the outside.
Right. And it's a little unnerving.
Yeah,
But intriguing at the same time.
a little bit of both, I think.
Yeah. And he gives us some specific examples of how sociology looks behind those facades.
Oh, okay. I'm interested. Tell me more.
So like in political organizations, it's not just about the laws
Right.
and the elected officials.
The official structure.
Right. It's about those informal power structures.
It's about who really pulls the strings.
It is. And it's the same in religious institutions.
Okay.
So, it's not just about accepting their pronouncements at face value.
Right.
We look at those actual power dynamics within those organizations.
Yeah.
And you know how those beliefs and those rituals are shaped by those social forces?
So we're not just taking the official doctrine as like the truth. We're looking at how it's actually practiced.
How it's actually lived. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And it's the same way with economic life.
Okay.
Those informal networks, those
Right.
codes of behavior that influence how people operate within those workplaces.
Yeah, it's like I'm thinking about like gossip at the water cooler could be just as important as like what's being said in the boardroom,
Absolutely.
right?
And even something as personal as courtship and marriage,
Okay.
it suggests that emotions like love
Okay.
are often the result.
So you're saying love isn't this magical, spontaneous?
It challenges our romantic notions of love.
That's a radical idea. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then he makes this distinction between social problems, as defined by public officials, and sociological problems as areas of inquiry for sociologists.
Okay. I'm interested in this distinction. What's the difference?
Well, he says that sociologists aren't just focused on fixing societal ills.
Yeah.
They're interested in understanding how that whole system works,
Okay.
regardless of whether those issues are considered a problem by the authorities.
So it's less about finding solutions and more about understanding the dynamics that create them?
Exactly.
He uses juvenile delinquency as an example.
Right.
And he's saying that the definition of the problem and its solution depends on whose perspective you're taking,
Right. So are you taking the authorities' perspective?
or the gang member's perspective.
We're the gang member.
Yeah.
That's a good example.
It is a good example. I like that. So it's really about seeing things from multiple perspectives,
It is.
rather than accepting the official definition.
And he says that that ability to question these official narratives is a key characteristic of sociological consciousness.
Okay.
And then he introduces this idea of a debunking motif that's inherent to the discipline.
Okay. Debunking motif. Tell me more.
It's about recognizing that things aren't always as they appear.
So like there's hidden agendas,
Hidden agendas, unintended consequences,
unintended consequences.
power dynamics at play that need to be uncovered,
Yeah.
like peeling back those layers of the onion.
Okay.
You know?
So it's about being skeptical and challenging those taken for granted assumptions.
It is. And he uses Emil Durkheim's study of suicide as an
Okay.
example.
So even something as personal as suicide
Even suicide!
is influenced by social factors.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not just individual psychology.
It's not just like, oh, that person was depressed.
Yeah.
It's like, what was going on in their life that led them to that?
What social forces
led to
that? Okay. I like that. And then, another one that he uses is Max Weber's work on the relationship between Protestant values and capitalism.
Right.
So, he's arguing that, the Protestant emphasis on hard work and thrift,
Right. Which was for spiritual salvation.
was meant for spiritual salvation, ended up actually contributing to the rise of modern capitalism.
Yeah.
Unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences.
That's really interesting.
And that brings us to this idea of the unrespectable view of society.
Unrespectable. Okay, what does that mean?
So that's about challenging these official, respectable narratives that dominate the public discourse.
So instead of focusing on like those perfect images of society, we're looking at the underbelly.
The parts that people don't want to acknowledge.
Okay, I like it. The seedy underbelly.
The seedy underbelly.
And so he highlights Thorstein Veblen
Yes.
as a key figure in this.
As embodying this unrespectable perspective.
Yeah. Veblen was kind of a rebel sociologist.
He wasn't afraid to say what he thought.
Okay.
He's famous for the concept of conspicuous consumption,
Right. Buying those expensive things, not for their value,
just to show off.
just to show off.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It is. And it's not just limited to Veblen.
Okay.
He points out that the Chicago school
Okay.
had a lot of work on crime and deviance.
So they weren't afraid to shine a light on those.
Those dark corners of society.
Yeah, the parts that make people uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he talks about this idea of the relativizing of values.
Relativizing values.
Yeah. So this is about recognizing that values aren't these absolute truths.
Yeah.
They're products of very specific social contexts.
So like what's right or wrong?
Right or wrong, good or bad, can vary widely,
Yeah.
depending on the culture, the historical period, and the individual's social location.
It's like when in Rome.
When in Rome.
Do as the Romans do.
Exactly.
Okay. So different cultures have different values.
Right.
And what's acceptable in one context could be taboo in another.
And this relativizing perspective is really a reflection of the modern era. Social mobility, exposure to all these diverse cultures.
Makes it hard to like cling to absolutes.
It makes it hard to cling to those absolutes.
Yeah. I mean, we're constantly being confronted with different ways of seeing the world.
And that forces us to question our assumptions
Yeah.
and recognize the limitations of our own perspective.
And social mobility is a big factor in this.
It is.
You know, as people move up or down the social ladder, they encounter different values and beliefs.
Right.
Yeah. It's like the fish out of water story.
Yeah. Suddenly you're in a new environment.
You can't help but notice the differences.
Exactly.
And that makes you question what you thought you knew.
And he emphasizes this through reference groups.
Oh,
The
yeah.
groups we identify with, the groups we look to for validation,
Right.
those provide a framework for us.
If you're surrounded by people who all believe the same thing,
Yeah.
it can be easy to think that that's the only truth.
It's easy to think that's the only way.
Right.
But when you encounter people from these different reference groups,
Yeah.
they have different ways of seeing the world.
It challenges those assumptions.
Challenges your assumptions.
Yeah.
And forces you to see that relativity.
So you're saying it's like that moment where you realize that your way of seeing the world isn't the only way,
It's not the only way.
that there are other perspectives that are just as valid,
That are just as valid, even if they conflict with your own.
even if they conflict with your own. And that's crucial for sociological understanding.
That's key.
It allows us to see beyond like those easy answers.
Yeah, those black and white, right or wrong dichotomy.
Embrace nuance, embrace complexity.
Embrace complexity.
That's a good place to leave off, I think, for now.
I agree.
Because now I think we can move on to like the individual's experience within society.
Right.
And he talks about the concept of location in society.
Yes, he does.
We've kind of been circling around that.
We have.
I think it's time to really focus on it.
It's time to break it down
Yeah.
and to see what he means.
So stay tuned for part 2.
We'll be right back. So we were talking about location in society.
Yeah. What does he mean by that?
Well, he says that our location, like where we are in these social structures, really impacts our life chances and opportunities.
So it's not just geographical location. It's also like our position in the hierarchy.
Exactly. It's like our class, our race, our gender, all those things that shape our experiences.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads into his discussion of social control.
Social control. So we're talking about the ways that society keeps individuals in line.
Right. Like how it enforces norms and values and maintains social order.
Okay.
And he talks about how those mechanisms operate on different levels.
Oh, yeah.
From like the informal pressures of relationships to the more formal sanctions of the legal system.
Yeah. So like we're constantly navigating those expectations.
We are. We're always trying to balance our own desires with what's expected of us. And understanding these systems of control is essential
For understanding how society functions.
how society functions, how individuals are shaped by those forces.
Yeah. It's like we're all actors on a stage
Right.
following a script.
But he does say that we have some agency, like we can improvise a little bit.
Okay. So we're not just puppets.
Not just puppet.
We can challenge those scripts a little bit.
Yeah, and that leads to the idea of role distance.
Role distance.
Yeah, it's how individuals can kind of detach from those roles that society expects them to play.
So it's about recognizing that we have our own individuality.
We do. We're not just blindly following those social scripts.
Okay.
And then he goes on to talk about ecstasy.
Ecstasy. In a sociology book. Okay. I'm intrigued.
It's about breaking free from those social constraints.
So like those moments when you feel truly alive?
Like those moments of transcendence.
Transcendence, yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. Like when you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And those experiences can be transformative.
Yeah.
They can kind of give us a glimpse of a different way of being.
So they can spark social change.
Yeah, potentially.
Okay. But are there any downsides to breaking free from social constraints? Could there be negative consequences?
Well, he doesn't really go into that.
Okay.
His focus is on the liberating potential.
Okay.
He says those experiences help us see the artificiality of social structures.
So we realize we have the power to change things.
Yeah. But, you know, it makes me think about the ethical implication.
Right. Like we talked about the potential for manipulation before.
Right. knowing how people are most open to new ideas
Yeah, exactly.
that could be used for good or bad.
That's a good point. You could use that knowledge to manipulate people.
You could.
Yeah.
And he acknowledges that in the book,
Okay.
that sociological knowledge can be misused.
Right. It's like any powerful tool.
Any powerful tool.
It depends on the intentions of the person using it.
And that's where that human element comes in.
Okay.
He argues that understanding should be used to promote well-being,
To make the world better.
not to exploit others.
Right. It's about responsibility.
It is.
Using our knowledge for good.
And he says that these insights can be used to challenge prejudices.
To make society more humane.
Yeah. But he also points out some of the challenges.
Within academia,
Yeah, the pressure to publish.
publish or perish.
Exactly. That can push people to focus on narrow questions.
Right.
Not the big, meaningful ones.
So it can stifle creativity.
It can. And he says it can lead to esoteric debates.
Stuff that has no relevance to the real world.
Right. And he calls for a return to the roots of sociology,
To focus on those big social issues.
the ones that actually matter,
To use our knowledge to make a difference.
not just to advance our careers.
Okay, I like that. But it sounds like a big responsibility.
It is. We're not just teachers.
We're guides.
We're guides helping students navigate these complex ideas.
So we're helping them develop that critical lens
The sociological imagination.
to see the world in a new light.
And he talks about the challenges for students, too.
Oh, yeah.
It can be unsettling to have your assumptions challenged.
To confront uncomfortable truths.
It can be easier to turn away.
Ignorance is bliss.
But he says that's harmful.
It prevents us from making things better.
And he challenges students to embrace those truths.
To use their knowledge to make a difference.
And he says it can be a liberating experience
Honoring.
to give them the tools to navigate the world
To challenge injustice.
and to create a more fulfilling life.
That's powerful.
Yes.
So we're not just teachers. We're also kind of therapists.
In a way, yeah.
Helping students process these difficult ideas
And he says we need to approach it with humility
with compassion.
because we're shaping their worldviews.
You're shaping how they see themselves.
And it should be transformative for both of us.
So it's a shared journey.
A shared journey of discovery.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these ideas connect.
They all fit together.
The sociological demon, the unmasking, the ecstasy.
The tension between objectivity and empathy.
It's all part of this humanistic vision.
It-
And in the next part, we'll explore why this approach is so crucial.
For understanding the human condition itself.
So we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Invitation to Sociology. And we've been talking about all these different ideas.
The sociological demon, ecstasy, the whole thing.
Yeah, the challenges of bringing in the scientific side with that human element that he talks about.
It's a lot.
So how does he kind of bring all this together? Like, what's the overall argument for why this humanistic perspective is so important?
Well, he argues that it offers a more nuanced and compassionate understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Okay.
It's recognizing that we're not just individuals, but social beings.
Right, like we're constantly being shaped by all these forces.
By history, culture, social structures, the whole thing.
So it's about seeing those connections even when we feel alone.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. But he also suggests that this perspective can be a path to political engagement, right?
Yeah, he argues that sociology can help us see beyond those ideological divisions.
Oh, those us versus them mentalities.
Right. It caused so much conflict.
It's about recognizing the shared humanity of all people
Okay.
and working to create a more just society.
But that's not always easy, right? I mean, the world can be overwhelming sometimes.
No, it's not easy.
Especially when you see all the injustice.
He doesn't shy away from those difficulties,
Okay.
but he emphasizes the importance of hope.
So believing that things can change.
Believing that our actions can make a difference.
So it's not about being naive. It's about having that sense of possibility.
Exactly.
We can make a difference.
And he says sociology gives us the tools to do that.
To understand the problems.
Identify where we can make change.
And then actually work to create that better world.
That's the goal.
It's inspiring, but it's also a lot of responsibility.
It is.
It can be a little daunting, honestly.
I think that's what makes this book so compelling.
Yeah.
It's not just a textbook.
It's a call to action.
To embrace the human experience.
To use our sociological imaginations.
And work together to create a better society. Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Invitation to Sociology, a humanistic perspective.
It's been a good one.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I hope it made you think a little bit.
And maybe sparked your own sociological curiosity.
And maybe you'll keep peeling back those layers of social reality.
Thanks for joining us.